Hello and welcome to EduAdvisor's webinar series where we will be speaking to specially invited guests who will share with us their expertise on courses, careers and more. My name is Josephine Ong and this morning we have Dr. Joel Low with us to talk about pursuing a career as a psychologist. A short background about Dr. Low: he is a clinical psychologist and the director of The Mind, a psychological center that focuses on psychological health and skills-based training. Dr. Low has a PhD in psychological medicine, specializing in clinical psychology, and has been practicing professionally in private clinics as well as hospitals for the last decade, conducting both therapy and psychological assessments. Thank you, Dr. Low, for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
How are you doing today?
Good, not too bad. Traffic's a bit of a pain, but it's not too bad actually. Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad to hear you're doing fine. So let's get things started.
Sounds good.
In your own words, can you explain what is psychology?
So psychology in general is the study of a human being's psyche, emotional functioning and psychological functioning, right? So we're trying to understand human behaviors, what makes a person tick, what goes on when something happens, for example, a tragedy happens, something happy happens and all that kind of things, right? So generally speaking, that's what psychology is. For me in particular, I'm a clinical psychologist, so my main key area of interest is in mental health, right? So where this usually our realm of work traditionally lies in the area of curative aspects, right? So it means when clients have depression, they have anxiety, they have OCD, they have schizophrenia, they have some ailment already, and then that's where we come in. We try and provide interventions that are evidence-based to try and get them back on their feet again. But I think more and more what you find is that psychology is also trying to branch out into the preventive aspects, right? So we want to try and increase the knowledge of mental health, for example, talking about what you can do to try and maintain or prevent clinical disorders from forming. So that's a lot of the work that I'm doing nowadays as well. So both preventive and also curative work. So generally speaking, that's what psychology is. Of course, there are other aspects as well. There's social psychology, for example. Social psychology studies what humans do in mass herds, like for example, mass groups, right? So for example, when 11/11 comes along and then there's like lots of online shopping, right? And just a couple of months ago, a lot of social psychologists will study the behaviors of people, how they buy things, why they buy things. Sometimes, I don't know if you did it as well, but my wife was buying things that she didn't really need, but just like, it's so cheap, I'm going to buy it, I may need it next time, right? It doesn't make sense logically, but on that day, or during that special event, it makes a lot of sense. Right, so social psychologists study that. We also have people who do neuropsychology, and they study the actual brain functioning, right? So they put you in MRIs and see what happens when you have a bar of chocolate versus, I don't know, you eat a powsum or something better, right? So there are different aspects of psychology. Right?
I see, okay. Do you think there is a great importance in the field of psychology?
I think so. I think especially in Malaysia, right, as we are developing as a country. So way back when in our grandparents' time, our parents' time, right, we were still very much a developing country. I think we still are a developing country by and large, right? But I think the societal needs has changed in the sense that the focus isn't so much on putting food on the table. It still is, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's obviously different swaths of populations, different people from different socio-economic status and all that kind of things, right? But I think as a society, we're moving to a point where good mental health, good emotional health, good psychological health is becoming important, right? And that's because now we have a bit more luxury, we have a bit more time, we have a bit more space to think that, okay, I'm sad, I'm feeling very down right now, I need some help, right? So I think that's why I think psychology is becoming more and more important. And I also think that for the younger generation as well, right? So people who are millennials and younger, they are very much more exposed to mental health issues, right? Through TV series like 13 Reasons Why, for example, and all that kind of things. By that exposure, then they know more about it. So when they go through troubles, then they want to look for help, right? So I think that's why psychology is becoming very important. It's better for them to have a good source of help rather than not, and then they have to go and experiment and try things on their own, and it might be a bit more damaging in that sense.
Yeah, I see. I see that you are very invested in this. Can I know why did you choose this career path?
This is something I wanted to do since I was 14 actually, right?
Wow.
So yeah, a long time ago. Now I'm what, 35? So that's like 21 years, something like that. So way back when I was 13, 14, I was going through my emo nemo age, lah, right? So I was like angry at the world, people hated me, I hated the world, that kind of thing. And then I think I was very lucky, right? So I had a group of friends who were sick and tired of my bullshit, basically, right? So what they did was drag me into an empty classroom one day and just gave me crap for an hour. So they scolded me and gave me shit for an hour, right? And I think it was good because that when I left that session, right, I left knowing that I had people who cared about me, people who were worried about me, and they wanted the best for me. And it really got me thinking that, okay, I think the world isn't so bad after all, right? And that was a big turning point for me. But also after the event, I thought to myself, I was really lucky to have friends like that. Right? I mean, they could have easily just said, screw you, Joe, I'm not going to bother about you anymore, off I go, right? It was easier for them to do, right? And I thought to myself, is everyone in this world going to be that lucky? Probably not, right? And that really got me started on this whole journey of finding out how I could help people who were similar to me. And so back then, I didn't know what clinical psychology was, but I knew I wanted to do something to help people, right, through counseling or whatnot. And from then on, it was something that I pursued non-stop. So I did my degree in psychology, did my master's in health, and did my PhD in UPM, all in efforts to become a clinical psychologist so that I could work and practice and see clients, right? So I think that's why I'm so invested in it, right? And also that's what I do to make a living now. So if I'm not, then I'll be in trouble, I think.
I see. So what do you love exactly about what you do, and what gives you the greatest satisfaction?
So I'm weird in the sense that for me, so I do therapy, I see clients, right? That's not work for me, right? So I run my own center. Work for me is balancing the books, making sure that we have enough clients coming in for my team members, making sure that we do for meetings and all. That's work for me, right? When I see my clients, the reason why I say I'm weird is because when I see my clients, that's when I have my most enjoyment, my most fulfillment. I actually have fun when I see my clients, right? So I think that's my main focus line in that sense, right? That's the way I derive a lot of my satisfaction from. So I think that's I don't know if that's answering your question, but what was the question?
What gives you greatest satisfaction,
Yeah,
and what do
sorry.
you love about
Yeah.
your job? Yeah.
So I think what gives me greater satisfaction is the fact that I'm able to explore a problem with someone, right? Understand what's going on, what triggers them, what's their patterns and all that. And I think that realization factor is actually really satisfying for me. So I like puzzles, right? And that's a great big puzzle to solve together with my clients, right? So that's one part. And the second part is, once we've solved that puzzle, what do we then do about it, right? How can we then move you away from these bad patterns, these old habits that you keep maintaining for yourself, and change your life for the better, right? So I think that's where I derive a lot of my satisfaction from. I think another thing that makes me really happy to do the work that I do is also just that I get to help people understand why they're in trouble or what's going on with them. So a lot of times when you talk about things like depression and anxiety, right, a lot of problems arise in Malaysia is because they don't know enough about it. So when they are going through depression or anxiety or panic or whatever it is, they don't know what's going on. And it's a problem because then it's very troubling, it's very scary.
Yeah.
So being able to convey that message to people and tell them, you know what, 3 out of 4 people have some sort of mental health disorder, right? So there's like 4 people here, for example. One of us here probably would have something, perhaps. But the thing is, it's actually absolutely normal, right?
Yeah.
So if you ask yourself, have you ever been sad before? Of course.
Yeah.
Right? Have you been through an exam before or went for your first driving lesson, for example? Were you scared? Of course you were, right? People with depression and anxiety go through the same thing as well. The only difference is that the levels of it, how extreme or how severe it can get. That's the only difference, right? So being able to convey that message to people is actually quite enjoyable for me. I quite enjoy that process as well because it helps. It makes them feel good about themselves.
I see. I'm sure your clients are happy that you are happy with your job.
Well, hopefully.
I see. So do you think that psychology is a good degree choice? As some Google search results seem to show that it may be a useless degree.
In a way, it can be, but let me caveat that, right? So It really depends on what you want to do with the psychology degree, right? So if you want to be a clinician like myself, like clinical psychologist or a counselor, then a basic degree is not going to get you anywhere, right? So in Malaysia, the minimum requirements to practice is a master's, right?
Yeah.
So you need to do at least a 2 years master's in a accredited program to be a practitioner, right? So that means your degree is 4 years, and then you have another 2 years after that. So it's almost like a medical degree, right? Now, the basic psychology degree is useless in the sense that if your desire is to practice, to see clients, then it's useless. But a basic psychology degree can open doors to a lot of different places, right? So, for example, I've got classmates who work in analytical firms, because a big part of our degree is also stats, right? So we do a lot of statistical analysis. So, by the way, caveat: if you think that doing psychology is good because you hate math, right? Bad idea. It's completely false, completely wrong. I think about half our degree is about stats and research and analysis and all that, right? But the good thing is that with that degree, what my friend did was that he joined an analytical firm, and he's doing number crunching for them, in that sense. So finding out what the different trends are, whether their marketing campaigns were significant, whether there was a significant increase, for example. So that's one of the fields he got into. Another one, my friend is into acting and directing now. So he's a local actor and director, right? And he's telling me stories that the psych background that he has is brilliant, because that allows him to really immerse himself in his characters, right? So you really understand why if a character is crying, it's not just because they're sad, because there's so many underlying issues, right? And him being able to incorporate that into the work that he does it enriches the work that he does, right? And I think the most one of the more popular areas that you can go into is also like HR, right? So a lot of HR departments, HR companies, right? They have a lot of psych graduates because of we know how hopefully right, how the mind works, how someone thinks, and all that kind of thing, right? And I think the final area that a lot of people have gone into is also like marketing and PR firms. So that's actually a big field as well, because if you think about it, marketing is knowing what people want and giving it to them, right? And what I'm making it sound simple, but it's not, but something like that. So I give you an example, right? You know how newspapers, when you open a newspaper, when you look at ads, right? The ads on the right page are always more expensive compared to the left. Why? Because when you open up a newspaper, the first thing you see is the right page, right? Those kind of ketchup bottles, tomato sauce, chili sauce bottles. You realize every time at the neck of the bottle there's a little label, right? And the reason for that is because tomato sauce, if you keep it on the shelf after a while, a little a crust forms. So what's that label for? It's to stop you from seeing the crust, so you won't be turned off by it, right? And that's all a lot of psychology in place, right? So if I don't see it, I'm going to buy it. It's not bad or anything, right? It's not like spoiled. It's just that if you don't see it, then you feel good about it, then you buy it, right? So I guess to answer your long answer to your short question is psychology degree is not useless if you know what you want to do with it, right? If you're going into it thinking, oh, it's cool, everyone does it, I should do it too, then you're stuff lah, right? But if you know specifically what you're trying to achieve with it, then it can be very useful because it opens up a lot of different avenues for you lah.
Yes, for sure. So if you want to pursue a psychology degree, you should find out what really you are into, right?
Definitely.
Okay, so many students are also confused between psychologist and psychiatrist. What are the differences between the two?
So I'll throw in counselors into the mix as well, because these are the three main mental health professions in Malaysia. Okay, so we start off with counselors, right? So counselors are basically mental health professionals who are trained to do talk therapy and counseling, right? But the main difference between counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists is the populations that we work with. Okay, so similar to counselors, a clinical psychologist also works with their clients using talk therapy and therapeutic methods, right? But the difference is that counselors will work with someone with more day-to-day kind of problems. So stress at work, for example, studying anxiety, break up with girlfriend, break up with boyfriend, that kind of thing, familial issues. So that's the realm of the counselor, right? A clinical psychologist, on the other hand, does all that, but we also have the added component of working with people from clinical backgrounds. So people with depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, the more serious mental health disorders, okay? Now, the psychiatrist does what a clinical psychologist will do in terms of the populations that they see, the clients that they see. The difference with a psychiatrist and a clinical psychologist is how they treat their patients. A clinical psychologist will work with talk therapy and counseling, like I said. A psychiatrist will work with the patients via medication, right? In Malaysia in particular, the distinction is very clear. So psychiatrists do meds, clin psychs do therapy, okay? But overseas, in let's say for example the States and Australia, it's a bit blurred. So in the States, for example, and Australia, you have psychiatrists who do therapy, like what I do. In America, for example, there are clinical psychologists who upskill themselves and they are able to provide some medication, right? So there are some blurred lines overseas, but in Malaysia it's very clear. So these are the three areas that we cover.
I see. So if someone wants to see like someone to seek help, who should they find? Like how do they know do they want psychologist or a
Good question, very good question. I think if you're not certain, then any one of them would be fine, right? Just to get a good, just get an idea of what's going on. Maybe there's nothing gone wrong in the first place, right? So my own personal bias is to see either a counselor or clinical psychologist first. Not because I don't trust medication, it's not that, right? It's just that if it's something that can be done without medication, why not try that first? The reason why I would advise that is because if you start off with medication, right? The thing about medication is that it treats the symptoms really well, but it doesn't manage the underlying cause. So let's say, for example, you're feeling sad and upset because you failed an exam. You take a pill, you feel better, you don't feel sad anymore. But are you still going to fail an exam? Probably because you don't study anymore, right? So if you see a counselor or clinical psychologist, then we address the root problem. That also means you're sadder for longer because there's no magic pill that gets you better. But in the long run, we teach you things like how to study better, how to manage your stress and anxiety. So the chances of you having another failure will be less. Now, there is an exception, of course. So let's say your depression is caused by some kind of chemical imbalance in your brain, which can happen as well. Then in those cases, then taking medication is the best route in that sense. So I think start off with seeing a clinical psychologist or counselor first, just to check and see. And if need be, the counselor or clinical psychologist will refer you to psychiatrist. And then off you go. That sense.
I see. Thank you for that.
No problem.
I'm sure many have been curious. Right. So back to studying psychology, what are some of the hardest parts about it? Like some students are surprised like they have to do maths, and like is there like a lot of it?
Like I said just now, it's about easily 50% is math, right? So most programs in Malaysia, the basic degrees, like if I'm not mistaken, you have a final year research paper, a thesis that you have to write. So it's either an individual thesis or a group thesis. And in that, you're expected to do analysis, right? So stats, number crunching and all the kind of things, right? And because, for whatever reason, psychology is really big on analysis, right? So I've compared, and this is a complaint of mine. So in my PhD research, right, for example, I did an analysis which basically looks at how one factor, right? So whether one negative life event, for example, how does that contribute towards depression, right? How do you see the links statistically, right? And that's analysis is what we call SEM, right? So structural equation modeling. I compared with my other friend who was doing his PhD in biotech, right? And he was doing t-test. T-test basically tells you these two numbers, significant or not significant, okay, that's it. So I'm thinking, hang on, that's not fair. So with that example, what I'm trying to highlight is that psych students do a lot of numbers. You do a lot of math, right? Granted, you don't do a pen and paper, like you don't count with your fingers or calculator, you use a computer, but still, you do a lot of math. So that's one of the biggest challenges, especially for people who think that, oh, psychology, I just read, I'll be done. No, complete bluff, no such thing, right? You do a lot of numbers. And that's another challenge with psychology. You do a lot of readings, right? Because you cannot understand the human mind without experiencing stuff, without reading stuff, without understanding different ideas and theologies and all that, right? So you'll be doing a lot of reading in terms of like journals and books and things like that. So I think if you're looking for something that's a bit more practical, right? So in the sense that, like accounting, for example, it's very practical in the sense that it's numbers, it's very detailed, straightforward, right? Then psychology is not for you because it's a lot more about analysis and in-depth exploration. We're talking about intangibles here. It's not about numbers. It's talking about your feelings sad. How sad are you? Right? How do you answer that question?
Problem solving.
Correct, that kind of stuff as well. So those are some of the challenges. So if you're someone who's more comfortable working in more concrete, tangible kind of items, then that's not for you, right? Because we're not that. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, definitely. So let's continue on with how long does it take for someone to be a psychologist from SPM? Can you walk us through your education journey?
So someone with a basic degree in psychology will not be classified as psychologist now, right? You can sign up to join the PERSIMA, which is the Psychological Association of Malaysia, but you're not a psychologist. You're not a psychologist, like you're just someone with a psychology degree. So in the psychology field, to be a psychologist, you need to have your master's at least, right? So post SPM, you probably will need to do a foundation in something, either foundation or a pre-psych degree, for example, right? So that's about a year, right? I think. Then after that, you have to do a psychology degree. So that takes you about 3 years or 4 years, depending on what program you go to. So some has a built-in honour, some don't. You have to do a 4th year, for example, like in Australia. And then after that, you need to do a master's, which is about a 2-year program after that. So all in all, you're talking about 7 years,
7
right?
years.
To be a psychologist, have a psych degree, then it's just after a psych degree, right? And then after that, if you want to do your PhD, that's another between 3 and 5 years, depending on how fast you go. So all in all, my entire journey took me about 10 years. Yeah, so
Did you have to do your practical in
Yep.
between?
So in your undergrad, you won't be able to do any clinical practical work because you don't have the training to do that, right? So you're doing more like industrial placements, right? So HRs and all that. But in your masters, it's actually a very significant component of it. So from like where I'm from, for example, we had a minimum requirement of 1,500 hours of practical training. So that took us about a year roughly, right? So that breaks down to about 30 to 40 clients. So that's a big part of our training, and it's necessary because when you go up and graduate, you're supposed to be able to start seeing clients and all that kind of things, right? And your PhD also same thing as well.
I see. Okay. So I hope you guys take note on that. Moving on, do you think that being a psychologist is a depressing job since you have to listen to people's problems?
Right. I was just having this conversation with someone just now, right? It can be, but it doesn't have to be, right? And what I mean by that is, I think one thing about psychology is that you have to have the right aptitude for it, right? So similar to accounting, right? If you don't like numbers, you don't like being meticulous and meticulous about the things that you do, accounting probably isn't the right job, so it's not for you, right? So the same goes with that, psychology, it has to resonate with you in that sense, right? So if, let's say for example, you're a really good student, you get really good grades, but you're not that way inclined to talk to people every day and work through them issues and all that, then psychology might not be right for you. You might still get the great grades, right? Like awesome grades, like distinctions and all that, fine. But when it comes down to actually doing the work, it might burn you out very quickly because you're not right for the job, right? So I think that's the first part, knowing whether you are right for it, right? So what I would advise students to do is, while you're still in high school, while you're still in college, there are plenty of clubs that you can join. Like I think in my previous high school, there was this Pembimbing Rakan Sebaya or something like that, right? A student support group. In my university, all the universities I went for, there were also peer support groups and things like that. So these are little organizations that you can join, where you have some experience helping people, working with people, for example, right? And that really gives you an idea or inclination of whether this would be right for you or not. If it is, great, then pursue it. If it's not, you find it very irritating or you find yourself very frustrated at the end of the day when you're hearing someone talk about their problems again and again and again, then it might not be for you. That's the first one, right? Secondly is that I think it's important to remember that psychologists are also humans, right? So it's almost like saying, if you're a doctor, you cannot get sick. It doesn't make sense, right? If you're a lawyer, you cannot get sued. It doesn't make sense, right? Same goes with that. A psychologist is not immune to becoming depressed or anxious or having OCD or schizophrenia and all that. So one of the things that we actually encourage all young psychologists, and actually all psychologists, to be fair, is to have a psychologist of their own, a counselor of their own, so they can work through their own issues and all that. So like you rightly put, it can get very depressing when we're hearing someone talk about their depression or their anxiety every single day, right? So we need to have an outlet to vent as well, to talk about our own issues and all that, right? The caveat is that we are trained in our master's program, PhD programs, to be able to have distance in that sense, right? So like what I tell my interns, for example, when you enter the room, you leave your own stuff at the door, your own baggage at the door, because the therapy is for your client, not for you, right? Same goes the reverse. When you leave the room, you leave all your client's baggage at the room. You don't bring it out with you, right? So you compartmentalize the things in that sense. So it's not to say that a psychologist doesn't care about you. We do. It's just that we have the right place and time to care about you. So when it's not your time, then we will focus on ourselves and other things like that sense, right? So to answer your question, it can be depressing. It doesn't have to be. It depends on how you deal with the situation.
I see. Thank you. That's very insightful.
No problem.
We'd like to know what are some of the things that has surprised you throughout your career as a psychologist?
Surprised me? I think it's probably my own frustration, right? Because, like I said, my studying journey took me about 10 years, right? So what was a giant pain in the butt for me was that, as I was studying, I was still a student, right? I see my friends getting jobs, getting a salary, getting promoted, having like being able to buy a car, buy a house and things like that, and all this while I was handing in assignments. So I think that was a big personal frustration for myself, right? And that's something that I think if you are going to be a psych student, is something to prepare for, especially if you're doing the clinical route, because it's a long time, right? So that's one. Another thing that really surprised me was how this is a general thing, right? I was trained to. I had really good supervisors and good lecturers, and they trained me very well to be a good clinician, right? Which is fantastic. But no one told me that running a business was a pain in the butt, right? So I may be a good clinician, and there are many good clinicians out there, right? But that doesn't make you a good business person. So I think that's something to remember as well. I think a lot of master students have this dream of graduating and then starting their own center, which is a great dream to have. But it's important to remember that starting a business is not easy, in the sense there are a lot of procedures, a lot of scoops that you have to jump through and all that kind of things, right? So I was lucky. My business partner is much more business savvy than I am. So he handles the business side of things. I do the psych side of things, which is fantastic for me, right? I tell everyone I see, if I didn't have him, I think we were bankrupted 5 years ago, which is how our company is, right? So that's something to remind yourself, right? Being a good clinician doesn't mean you're a good business person, and that's a big, it's a very realistic problem to have. And I think the final one, the ones really surprised me was how after I graduated, the way I evaluated the relationships in my life was quite interesting in that sense, right? Because of the work that I do, the studies that I do, I have to evaluate and understand how people function and operate, right? I think one of the side effects or negative side effects of being a psychologist is also that when people come up to you with crap, right, or crap in the sense that they're out to manipulate you or use you and all that, you're acutely aware of it, right? And for me, the decision to cut out certain people in my life was a necessary thing to be done, but it was a hard thing to be done as well. So nowadays I'm much happier in the sense that I've got a smaller, more close-knit group of friends and less fluff friends, like that makes sense, right? And I think that's one of the weird side effects of being a psychologist. Like, you are more acute to crap that people throw at you, and then bullshit, bad things that people throw at you, right? And you can do things about it, which is quite nice. And the nice thing also is that you also know when a relationship is worth pursuing and worth having, and when it's not worth it, like that. It's one of the weird things that happen.
I think that is a good side effect to have.
Good or bad, I don't know. It really depends on your perspective.
Although some people do say, like, you may tend to be more judgmental and people are more aware of themselves with psychologists.
Yeah. Sometimes you just gotta. Someone told me recently, you gotta just stay stupid, right? And in the best of ways, because it's a very easy for us to start analyzing everyone we meet, right? Even for the first
do you
meeting.
Do that?
So the reason why I think the stay stupid is really great, because I tell myself not to, right? So especially when I'm talking to friends or family members, I can and I might, but if I do that, then everyone becomes a client. I don't have any friends anymore, which will kill me, like, in that sense, right? So stay stupid is brilliant, because every time I'm out there, not in the room, I tell my friends, you're not paying me, I'm not analyzing you, so that's it. I just be myself, I just Joel with them, I'm not anybody else now.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know. Another golden question I'm sure many students want to know is, how much money do you make?
Enough. That really depends on the where you're working, the kind of work that you do, right? So in Malaysia right now, clinical psychology is still not yet recognized profession by the government fully, right? It's changing. The Allied Health Act is approved already. It's actually going to be enforced soon. And when that happens, then clinical psychology will be recognized as a full-fledged profession. And the benefit of that is, once that happens, then government agencies will be able to employ clinical psychologists properly. Right now, most hospitals you see one or two, maybe sometimes, sometimes not even any, right? So that's a big problem, right? But private hospitals are a bit better. So in the private arena, if you have a master's degree, a fresh grad, you're talking about anywhere between 3,000 to 5,000 a month, around there, roughly, depending. Government is a bit less, but then you have your COLA, your cost of living allowance, so it adds up to about that same amount. Okay. Private centers there in Malaysia, I probably would guess 95% of us are work on a consultancy model, right? So that means we don't have any full-time employees in our center, but we have, let's say, 10 consultants, right? And what happens is basically you're doing part-time work, right? And in these cases, you get paid per hour, right? And that can, so the normal charge within the Klang Valley for clinical psychologists is anywhere between $250 to about $600 so per hour, right? So if you work for a center, you're probably taking back about half lah. So the center will take about half usually depending on where you work, and then the psychologist takes back about half. So depending on the number of clients, so this one is one of those thing right? You work harder, you get more money kind of thing. Right? So, but I have heard of cases where consultants are taking back anywhere between $3,000 to $6,000 a month, working just part time like that, right, in different centers. So it's okay lah. The only issue is that if you're someone who is driven by promotions, things like that, then you're kind of not in the right profession. Private centers is about 3,000 to 5,000 starting, right? But as you get more experience, then obviously you can charge more. So years of experience counts, your qualification counts as well. So obviously as a PhD holder, for example, you can charge a bit more. And also the kinds of work that you can do also increases. So like me at my level right now, I also supervise students. So I get paid for my supervision time as well. So that's another source of income. So it does increase, but how it increases, how much increases really depends on you and how hardworking you want to be.
I see, okay. So what advice would you give students looking to study psychology? Do you have any tips?
I think, like I said just now, you need to know why you're getting the profession, right? If you are doing it because my friends are doing it because it sounds cool, then you might be choosing the wrong profession for yourself, right? That's the number one. Number two, make sure you have the right aptitude for it. Like I said just now, if those student clubs or university clubs that you have, and you do join them, find out whether you have the right aptitude for it, whether you are passionate about the field or not, and then go for it, in that sense, right? And I think the third thing is to make sure you take care of yourself, right? I think the profession attracts a lot of supermen and superwomen. What I mean by that is that we attract a lot of people who want to save the world, right? I'm going to make sure my clients go home happy and they're not sad anymore, and that's not true. That's not our job. Our job isn't to make people feel good about themselves. Our job is to help them understand themselves, right? So if you are someone who thinks that I need to save the world, then you need to make sure you take care of yourself, because you're going to get burnt out very often. It's not uncommon for you to have 5 clients in a day, for example, 4 of them walk out crying. It's not uncommon, but they're crying for good reasons, in that sense, because they found out more about themselves, they know what's happening and all that, right? So take care of yourself, that's also important. I think those are my 3 top tips.
What are your self-care rituals?
So like I say, I'm weird, right? So my self-care is to see clients. So I enjoy that. Like, you give me a day of meetings and I just get completely bummed out after that. But if I have a client or 2 in between, I'm good to go, right? So that's my self-care. That's the first one. Second one is I find, maybe it's my age talking here. This is going to be my age showing here, right? So I've got 2 kids now, right? So when you're with kids, there is no way you can think about work. Impossible, because they'll be pulling you in a million different directions. There's so many diapers to change, bottles to make, and all that. So I think family time for me is really useful as well, because I just completely switch off from work. I have to, no choice, right? And I think third thing is friends. So like I said, I've pruned down my friends a lot. So those people who I still call friends now are really important, good friends to me. So yeah, that's also another way that I take care of myself.
See, thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we have come to the end of the session. Thank you all for joining our webinar series on So You Want to Be a Psychologist with Dr. Zhao Lo. And thank you, Dr. Lo, for sharing these key insights on the field of psychology. We do hope that you have gained some valuable insights, and may it help you in your pursuit of tertiary education.
Good luck.
We'll see you again next time. Bye.
Bye.